I think we thought we would start, because we haven't rehearsed anything. We've tried not to talk about this beforehand so that it's all really fresh for you. Not that we're winging it.
We didn't want to come up with a script, did we?
No, we didn't want a script. But we thought we would start by just starting to think about what community work meant for each of us. And yours is quite specific, isn't it? Your community.
Yes, I've worked with kind of communities in lots of different ways. But my particular kind of take on community is I prefer to use the word communal making rather than community of kind of makers. And the reason for that is within my practice, I'm really interested in flattened hierarchies. Okay, I don't particularly kind of like enjoy the kind of idea of status in things. I like everything to be equal, and so my understanding of community when I was doing some research into it was that you have a leader, and then other people come along and join in. Whereas communal is the idea that actually everybody is on an equal level. There's no particular leader, and the whole group will kind of take responsibility for what goes on. So for me, that kind of provides an immediate flattening of kind of like, so I don't come in as the tutor or the teacher. And that was kind of how I got involved in quilting. Was I was doing some research on the idea of amateurism, celebrating it. And as an artist, I was really interested in kind of like how there's so much kind of like fresh ideas that you see in people who aren't formally trained. And so I like to do my research through practice. So I was thinking, right, okay, so what do I know nothing about? I'm going to set up a group in quilting because I can't quilt. So I was like, yay, we can do this. So in my local village.
No, you see, I thought you'd set that group up because you liked quilting.
No, I was like, what don't I know anything about? Let's see how we all learn this together. And of course I turned up and I had quite a lot of people join, which was really exciting. And I explained to them that I wanted us all to learn together. And every single one of them said, well, Nicola, I'm not coming back if you're not going to teach us. And I was like, oh no, what's that all about? So I spent a very long week on YouTube and learned enough about quilting so that I could get the group to trust that actually we can all learn this together. And so
you see, it's interesting because I joined the WI one time. I lasted a week because they started up a craft group and I thought I want to go along and do stuff with other people. And as soon as they realised what I could do, they wanted me to teach them. And that's not what I wanted at all.
That was what happened to me.
I wanted to sit next to somebody and do my thing while they were doing their thing. That's exactly it. Funny.
So the turquoise kind of like tealy coloured quilt that's behind you was the first quilt that was made by the group. And I kind of taught everybody, but my style, there's a few people in here who have experienced my teaching. My style of teaching is more to kind of just hopefully empower people to kind of feel like they can do it themselves rather than as an instruction kind of thing. So we got through it, and 7 years we all worked together, and they were most definitely leading the group by the end. It wasn't, probably within about 6 months, I would say. They'd be like, and they'd be saying, oh, Nicola, tell us what to do. How do we do this? So I'd say what we'd do. I'd be like, I don't want to tell you. And they'd be like, just tell us. So I'd show them how to do something and say, right, we're going to do this. And then by the end of the evening, I could hear them all giggling at the other end of the quilt. And I was like, what are you doing? They're like, nothing, Nicola, nothing. And of course, they were all just completely doing whatever they wanted to do anyway, because they didn't want instruction and be told what to do.
My example of a very, very similar thing is that, and you'll see in the slides as they rotate round, I was leading a project, a military wives project, where the notion was to go in and support military wives to develop new skills. And I would work at Topcliffe, in Dishforth, at Catterick, kind of North Yorkshire locations. And the really interesting bit for me was that textiles, any form of textiles, and we did do quite a lot of quilt making, but any form of textiles became an incredible leveller through that community. So in a group, we might have squaddies' wives, and we might have captains' wives or sergeants' wives, and in their world, there's this incredible hierarchy, and you've got to,
Absolutely, yeah.
nod your, tug your, what is it? Tug your forelocks,
isn't it?
And when you're sitting in front of a sewing machine, or you've got a needle in your hand, everybody's in the same place. Or it could be actually that Squaddy's wife knows what to do, and it all comes to her fingertips. Occasionally we had the occasional man turn up, but not very often. And it was this fantastic leveller, and it was wonderful when you maybe had a squaddy's wife having to help out that captain's wife, and it was almost like their roles were reversed, because there is, I don't know if you experienced this in your family, in your upbringing through forces, but the captain's wives are given a role to look out for the squaddy wives and be like a mother figure, a mentor. And that got completely switched when we introduced textiles in there. And that was really great to switch things up, switch up the norm of their lives, and empower people that haven't normally quite got the same amount of power.
Yeah.
I thought it was ace.
Did you ever get any
Exciting.
feedback that kind of like helped relationships outside?
It did definitely help
build
relationships.
bridges.
Yeah, absolutely, it did. And the last part of the Military Wives project, we left, the idea was that we could leave some sort of legacy, and so we managed to get enough funding to be able to buy a load of sewing machines and buy lots of textile equipment and leave it at one of the bases so that everybody could access it. And without me, without anybody, that group carries on, and it's been going for years. Perfect. On its own. So kind of gave them enough for them to then fuel themselves. It's great. So yes, I'm really proud of that project.
Yeah, so I'm from a forces family, so both my parents were in the forces, so we moved every two and a half years. So from a legacy point of view, that kind of like kept, because you know that within 6 months there would have been, some of them would have been shipped out to somewhere else, and new people coming in. So I imagine the kind of like the forward of that would be great.
What we hoped is that people would feel confident enough to take their information to the next base, and that would give them, because it was so difficult moving from base to base, and then getting your feet under the table and making friends. Using textiles would be one way to find a little group of people who were like-minded, who could do something with you, or you could show them a thing that you've got, and it's quite cool.
Yeah. Do you find, I've found with kind of like groups, particularly working around, because we did, when we were quilting, rather than doing machine stitch as a quilting group, we were hand quilting everything. So I went and learned from the G's Bend quilters about how they make quilt frames and things like that from Vimeo, and over and over again, watching the videos over again. But what happens when you have kind of like a community of people working around with textiles is the way kind of conversation's different.
Yes.
Something about textiles and hand stitching, maybe it happens in other things, but I think there's something very particular about making people feel comfortable about
relax,
talking, and opening up.
Yeah.
So moving into a new area, I think that's a really nice way to.
We found that through the Military Wives project. But again, as you see the slides go through, I'll point them out, particularly when they come through. Then I spend quite a bit of time in Italy, and the village that I'm near, I needed to get to know people in that village quickly. I wanted to get to know them quickly. I wanted to introduce myself to them, and I use quilt making for that very purpose. And so we would sit round. Everybody else is Italian. I'm English. My Italian isn't great, but it really gave me the chance to practice and have people who were sympathetic to my poor language. So it helped me to do that.
Fantastic.
And so I did a whole project just so that I could sit next to people and practice Italian.
That's great.
But what we did do with that project as well, going back to the levelling thing, every family in the village had a little part of that quilt, because I went into the school and printed with all the children in the school. And their teacher said they won't be able to do this in a couple of hours, but I said, yeah, they can do it. They each made a hexagon and printed it, having designed their own image first. And they printed it and stitched their own hexagon, and then we stitched them together later. So that means every family in the village has got some sort of connection to this quilt, because everybody's connected to a child in the school. And therefore, by my logic, I'm connected to them too.
Hey.
So they all know of me because of quilt making. And traditionally in the village, we finished the hand sewing element of the quilt in Margherita's piazza, because Margherita was the lady who made all the quilts in the village when anybody got married. She was almost like the official quilt maker.
Okay.
And so outside her house, there's a little square in front of the school. And we used that as our final base locations. And we did find a picture from back in early 50s of her and a couple of other people stretching out the quilts so chairs turned the wrong way round, so that it stretched the quilts out a bit.
Marvellous.
And
so amazing.
It kept all those women together. It gave them something to do collectively.
Absolutely. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So it brings people together in a very beautiful way. This is the military wives' work. One of the things that we found we needed to do to encourage people, because it was difficult. Some people gravitate towards quilt making or textiles, and some people don't really know what it might be able to give them, so they need some encouragement. And before they see the light.
Yes.
And so we created lots of small, quick projects to make things for the home, or for women to make things for themselves, so that they could see how fantastic it was immediately, and they saw the gain straight away. And then within a relatively short period of time, they were hooked, and they understood how powerful making something unique for themselves could be. So hence the lampshade making that you saw there, and the bag making and things like that, making personal things before we made a group thing.
Textiles is a funny thing, isn't it? Because a lot of people don't understand it. It's always about so when I tell people that I do textiles or I work in textiles, it's always like, oh, so do you knit scarves? Do you make cushions? Can you mend my trousers? But it's associated with kind of fashion or interiors, which are separate things in their own rights. So people do struggle, even though everybody knows textiles so personally, don't they? Because we all wear it, we sleep on it, and we surround ourselves by textiles from when we're born to when we move on, and yet just textiles in their own, it seems to be kind of quite a complicated thing for people to kind of like grasp the idea of.
Why you would do
it always
it.
feels like it has to become a product.
Yeah. And yes, and for that particular project we had to do a product.
Yes.
Whereas in the Italian village, they got it. They got community. Maybe it's a country thing. Maybe it's a cultural thing, because they all understood straight away that you would work together.
Yeah. Well,
That's
it's interesting when I've been around some places abroad, most of the villages will always have a lace maker or a knitwear maker, or lots of different kind of like, and so it's still embedded, isn't it, in kind of like the cultural kind of everyday.
And I think there is more just general community understanding in maybe in other places. It could be a bit of a generalisation, but I think possibly definitely the Italian village understand, because they've got multi-generational living, you know, they do live together, and they definitely have bigger family groups. So working in a group seems to come more naturally, for sure. When we did this quilt, were any of you part of that? No? Yes. Yes. And that was, it was through COVID. It was 2 years ago. It was during lockdown, and I was desperate to do a community quilt or to do a community piece of work, regardless of how awkward and difficult it was going to be. And prior to that, I'd led with others. So with Maggie and Bob from the African Fabric Shop, and with help from Janice Gunner, we put together a virtual quilt. So I filmed a little video of me making a log cabin, and then invited other people to do the same wherever they were in the world. And they photographed what they did and they sent it to me.
I did that as well.
Yeah. Did you?
Lots of Dionne's projects.
And I put them all together. You'll see a photo in a minute. Put them all together. And we had over 500 blocks sent in virtually. I've never seen any of them in the flesh at all, or in the fabric. And they all simply existed online. Some people did get together and put theirs together, I think, and gave them away for charity scenarios. But after that, I was so desperate to do something with people. And then I think we had another lockdown or something. I can't remember the details, Natalie, but
I think it was in the second one, wasn't it?
It was in the second kind of lockdown. So I filmed different ways to make blocks, and then people had to get a little group of 4 together to negotiate with one another how they put 4 pieces together. So there was negotiation on finding a group virtually. Complicated.
I can imagine it was a nightmare.
But fascinating to see how people then took that on. So it started with me having an idea, but then left it open to people's interpretations. And then some people's groups just did their own thing. They did whatever they liked.
Tell me about it. That was what my group was all about.
Yeah. And they did it marvellously.
You give them one thing, they say, tell me what to do, Nicola. Tell us what to do, Dionne.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, we're not going to do that.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And that's fantastic. People's individual thought is what it's all about.
Yeah.
I mean, we've both worked in education for a long, long time. And the one thing that we're trying to do through that direction is to make independent thinkers, to create risk takers. I remember when we were both working at the university, they put in a little tick box for have you taken risks, therefore you can get an extra mark if you've taken a risk and it didn't work. And that was a major moment. That was a big move forward, that you actually got a thumbs up for taking a risk, even if it didn't work. it's just,
I think it's so important in creativity to take away all that, try to take away the angst of doing something wrong. And I think one of the things I really enjoy
but the thing is, how do you know when something is wrong?
Well, exactly. That's exactly the point. It is but the thought of doing something or something that you hadn't planned on doing.
But I don't have a plan.
Well, you don't. I don't. But lots of people do.
If you have a plan, if you have a vision, then it could go wrong. If you don't have either of those things, it can only go the way it goes.
Absolutely. But lots of people aren't able to do that, are they?
I don't get that. How do you teach people not to have a plan? That was a question to everybody. I would like to know. But I do genuinely, when I'm teaching, when I'm working, that is my hope, that people leave without a plan.
I think it comes through trust, doesn't it? Trust in kind of like believing that what you're doing, what the choices that you're making are worthy and are the right thing. And so you have to kind of build people's confidence, because a lot of people come without confidence. And so for me, that's what it's about. So it's not about teaching people to not have a plan, but people start to work without plans once they start to feel confident and go, okay, I've got a bag of all sorts here. What could happen if I go and play with these? What's the worst that could happen? And that's a fantastic moment, I think, in creativity. For me, I think we're both very similar in that.
And I think for both of us, we touched on it earlier on, that our individual work stems from drawing, and drawing is absolutely everything. And drawing can give you the direction for a quilt. It can give you the direction for jewellery. It can give you the direction for garments. Anything you might ever consider. Drawing something, drawing anything, whether it be with pencil, whether it be with pair of scissors and bits of fabric, it is, for me, observational drawing, actually, if I'm going to be specific, is the root of everything, because I learn through looking, and I love that. But I think you draw in a different way, don't you?
Yeah, although I do observe, but I observe and then do my own, take it on a tangent, off on a tangent. So there's always something there, often landscape, and both of us are very much kind of like driven by that. But observation is there, but probably not as, I'm probably quite loose with it, shall I say.
My observation is, well, it's personal. It's personal to me, and the things that I find interesting and quirky, in terms of shape and form and structure, other people might not be interested in those. They might not find them inspiring. But for me, when each of us observe and find the thing that just kind of gets each individual person going, and observes that and finds some way to record that, then always work becomes unique. And it's
absolutely.
At the end of the day, that's for me the thing to strive for, is to creating unique work. Unique thinkers, unique thoughts, and then nothing can be derivative either.
Absolutely.
Which is just blissful. A blissful place to be.
It is, but that it's so true about that kind of like that uniqueness that can come through it. So even though I often then go on to work with textiles as a medium in some way or another, whether that's through printing, through embroidery, or through quilting, the sparks of fresh ideas nearly always come because I've done a drawing, and that's kind of like made me think about materials and, oh, well, how does that happen? How did that happen? And then when I pick up the fabrics and I get to the sewing machine, or if I'm hand stitching, I'm like, oh, I think I can kind of get to that from this point. Whereas if I just sit with my fabric or sit with a screen to do some printing, it kind of doesn't quite.
I like the concept of making a drawing. So you've created a drawing on paper, for instance, and then you look at it and you think, okay, how could I make that as a thing, as an object? So if there were a watery area, I'd be looking for something transparent to replicate or suggest that. And, you know, that kind of thing. If there was a strong, solid line somewhere, I'd be looking for something that would maybe, you know, plastic cord or something that would replicate that. So I've always got in my mind, how would I actually make that drawing if I had to make it almost like a sculpture, or what material, what thing would replicate that type of quality that's on the page. I like that.
So I also think about drawing as kind of like a map, as opposed to textiles, but probably don't in the same way as I don't translate from my drawing comes from loose observation and kind of sparks of ideas, and I find my drawing is also about sparks of ideas. So a drawing might be really, really complex, and it's sometimes my drawings have got an insane amount of things going on. It's absolutely ludicrous. And that might be the spark of an idea for, well, how can I get that kind of complexity and those kind of ideas going on in my textiles, rather than, oh, that looks like that. So it never looks like my drawings. But in my head, it's very much coming from my drawings. And sometimes my drawings are quite, I don't know what happens. I don't know why. Sometimes my drawings are quite serene and quite calm. And so then, again, when I come to the textile development, it's those kind of ideas that I'm looking to translate. So it's always about just feeling out for things and seeing. When I draw, I play with so many materials as well. So that idea often kind of comes through. So I might be sewing with linen, or I might be hand stitching with paper and stuff. So lots of different things come through in that way. So
it's interesting, isn't it, that ideas come to you as your hands start getting busy. So there is a thing that I read about. I don't read a lot. I sew things, don't read. There's a kind of like a meditation that happens with repetition, any kind of repetition. It could be, I'm sewing back and forwards. I do a lot of free machine embroidery. That's what I've specialised in over recent years. So I could be sewing away, which seems like a really kind of hard work. It is a hard work kind of thing, but you're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I'm watching and I'm looking at what I'm doing, but actually my mind's floating away because my hands have gone into automatic pilot, a bit like when you're quilting, particularly hand stitch. So I hear, but I don't do much hand stitch. I like fast and furious stuff.
I like fast and furious drawing. I like slow stitching.
Yeah, I like fast both. But this repetitive motion where your hands, where your body knows what it's doing without having to think about it, actually does free up additional information in a certain cortex of the brain, brings that forward, and it helps you resolve creative problems, other problems as well. So it kind of makes sense that people sitting round sewing together, creating this quilt, doing those running stitches as they quilt, they're solving world problems, their own world
Absolutely.
problems, because their hands know what they're doing. You don't have to think about that as you're sitting around next to somebody sewing. You can delve, for some reason, you can delve into deeper parts of the brain, your own brain, their brain, because you can ask more challenging questions.
I think that's what's quite nice as well about communal stitching as well, is because so if people are kind of concerned about whether their stitches look like somebody else's stitches, if you're wanting them to all look the same, if everybody's talking, the hands just take over and people stop worrying about that. And
do you think as well, because if you're all kind of sitting round and you've got your bit of quilt that you're working on here, I think it's a bit like a comfort blanket as well. It's on your lap and you're slightly protected.
Well, so when we set up our quilt frames, and Debbie's hiding over there, one of the quilters around the frame. What was really interesting, because this was before COVID as well, we were all strangers. None of us knew each other really before we started quilting together. And I made this frame because they insisted that I showed them what to do. And we made this frame and we turned up, and then we all sat around it, and suddenly we realised we all had to sit like really this tight to sew, and suddenly we were complete strangers, and the other person was only there, so our knees were all touching, okay, our hands and our elbows were all touching, and they were complete strangers. We would sit there for 2 hours, so it really did kind of like break down barriers. And I don't want to name names, but somebody in this room used to get really challenged by thinking that they'd got a knot underneath, so they would then climb underneath the frame. So I've got these amazing photographs of them underneath the frame, all amongst everybody else's knees, and everybody else is just carrying on sewing, and some people would have their shoes off. But there is something that kind of like comfort of kind of like coming together. It's amazing. And then of course we went into kind of COVID. And the idea then, I was looking at these photographs of everybody working so closely together, was just really poignant, really.
How did you continue as a group during that time? Did you?
We didn't. We couldn't really. So we carry on kind of like communicating.
Yes.
Through the thingy-majigs, phones.
Yeah.
And there is discussion of us kind of like getting back together and joining up, but just times kind of changed, don't they?
Yeah, times have changed, haven't they? Everything's changed.
People took on other things as well, and but hopefully we will get back together, but not at the moment.
Yes, but quite a few of the quilting group did do pieces for this book.
Yes. So and they did choose to do it differently to
everybody else.
So, but that's what happens when you make a communal rather than a community group.
Yeah.
They all decide.
I even gave everybody the fabric to use so that the colours would all be the same, bearing in mind that I did have an inkling that people would do their own random thing.
You did say we could
add in a little bit,
add bits in.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the behalf of Melton Quilting defence, I will say.
I think it's ideal, absolutely ideal. Has anybody got any particular questions? Because I'm very, very aware that people would come to a talk like this because you have a particular interest and desire to maybe get more involved in community work in some way, or you've got a particular thought on it yourselves. Have you been involved in any community pieces?
Been involved in a national project.
In a national one?
A lot of us haven't actually met, but we have Zooms and we're crafted it so we express our anger.
Right.
Which group's this? Right. Threads of Survival.
Threads of Survival. So a lot of us haven't
Fantastic.
met.
Okay.
Our co-founder was killed in a car accident in January. Climate actually killed him in California.
Goodness.
Street weather.
Wow.
We had regular Zooms, so it would start off as, well, how would you do this or how would you do that? And then it ended up where, well, I'm going to put this and I'm going to put that, and I want to express exactly how I feel.
So the group gave confidence. It gave individuals confidence.
It gave you the ability to say what you want in textiles without thinking of pussyfooting around the sidelines and not upsetting anybody. So there are some pieces that do upset people.
Mm-hmm.
And from other exhibitions, one in Cornwall, they created their own group in the Cornwall Museum, and they've created a quilt which is hung around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the third block in, second row up, or it might be the other way around. And I can't look at that without crying because it's so emotional. So people have expressed their sadness, some have expressed their anger, and some have made things quite comical.
Mm.
And from people who've never done anything before, they've used fabric glue because they didn't really want to use a needle. So we made it inclusive, that it didn't matter what your skill was.
Mm.
But we don't keep gluing things back on. Well enough. And we thought we might be able to make this, but I was on a Zoom with you about this quilt 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I mentioned to Natalie that at the Ravenston Park event that we might have 3 quilts because we show them at this exhibition. And we've actually got them in place here and at Bagshore Museum.
Right.
We've now gone into garments, by the way. We don't just do quilts, we actually
Oh, really?
garments. So that you can actually wear them and you can go in a protest and actually wear a garment
With
that.
Wow.
These messages. So we found that really interesting.
That's powerful.
I would like to meet everybody that we've met, and a lady from London.
So how many people are there in the craftivism
Altogether,
movement?
there's about nearly 200 people that actually contributed, but
Right.
all of those people on the original Zooms.
Mm.
These have come from where there've been exhibitions, and somebody said, "We'll try and make our own in Cornwall, shall we try and make our own in Chorley?"
Mm.
So then they sent us their pieces to exhibit, and then they'll get them all back.
So Zoom has managed to take the place of sitting round together, and it's managed to give each of you voice and confidence.
It started off really because there was the health and care bill, because we're all originally the original team are NHS campaigners,
Mm-hmm.
and we couldn't campaign because we were all in different bubbles, we were all in different parts of the country, and it was about the health and care bill that was going through Parliament that had to be stopped. But it hasn't been stopped, but we wanted to stop it. So originally we started doing handkerchiefs, a bit like Sarah Corbett.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we sent handkerchiefs out to various MPs that we knew would vote to get would vote in favour of this bill, saying don't blow it, kill the health and care bill before it kills us. And then certain ones of us put a little message on for one of our MPs who's a great walker. So I put ours and don't walk over our NHS.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ones in the RAF, so I put don't take the wings off our So we personalised them and then got somebody from their constituency to sign a letter,
Mm-hmm.
and then they would post it. We felt we were doing something, and we were all bereft that the bill went through. So then we said we've got to do something now, we've got to get this message out about what's happening. And that's initially how it started. And then climate is linked to the NHS, the word the climate is, affects health. So we've linked climate and the NHS together.
Right. Right.
The lady from London came to see the exhibition last week because she was on one of our original Zooms.
Oh, wow.
And she connected. We finally got our emails working because obviously Steve had all the passwords, and she don't want to come up and just say goodbye to Steve and meet the team. And she's now trying to get a venue for us in London.
Fabulous. Fantastic.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
It
Fantastic.
Was, yeah, she's just put us all up, so that'd be
So obviously it's come from a craftivist and perspective, which often uses textiles.
At
But
the launch of the exhibition, now I was to speak, and I said, I can't think I've spoken in a microphone. I've usually got a megaphone and a placard. Yeah, but I did go for quilting lessons years ago before my son was born.
right, I was going to say, why did you go to textiles?
I'm not a very good quilter. I once spoke to Barbara Chainer. I don't know if you know Barbara Chainer.
No, I don't.
She's
Sorry.
written books on quilting.
Okay.
And I just said, I can't do the standard 10 stitches to the inch. And she said, as long as you have
Oh, really?
Yes.
Is that a
No,
thing?
Yeah, no.
as long as you
Even
have
16 to the inch is what
Oh,
they
for
talk
goodness
about.
sake. I'm so not
We're
a
about 1 to an
quilter.
inch.
I'm so not a quilter.
She just as long as you enjoy it.
That's the point, yes.
Mm. I'm not a quilter. There are far too many rules in quilt making. It's full of rules.
There are.
Oh.
Well, if you want to move on,
But-
that's perfect. But I don't think.
Yeah, well, I'm.
I
No,
think there's
no,
so many rules in
no.
everything, isn't there? It's
There
just like,
could
it's a
be.
starting point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it feels good to break them all, doesn't it?
Exactly.
I think.
I think through lockdown, I did also watch a lot of quilting YouTube stuff.
Ah,
Loads of it, actually. And you can go down a real rabbit hole, can't you, on YouTube,
totally
watching that stuff.
Can't you? Yes.
It has been done. It has been done. So anybody else take part in community projects recently? Maybe you've got part of something in here.
I'm a bit handicapped with dental work, so
Okay.
bear with. I think one's really exciting this year because I think there's been a great mix of activities to try, because I'm a dabbler, I'm sort of keen to learn, but what you said about the rules and going wrong, I think in education these days it's all target driven till you get your options, so all this creativity has been bashed out to us, if you like.
Absolutely.
To then try and develop that, there's like 50 years of undoing and grandma squares before you can find your thing.
Yes, I do hear that quite a lot, and I have a lot of people who come on workshops with me who say, oh, well, I was told that I couldn't draw at school.
Yes,
And it's the saddest thing. It's the saddest thing. And I was told, my mum told me that I couldn't sing, so I don't sing. We won't be testing
My mum did
it.
the same to me.
I
Sorry,
do
Mum,
not
if you're
sing.
watching, it's true though, and now I won't sing.
I won't sing because I was told when I was little I couldn't. And it's mentally scarred me. So I completely understand how the equivalent with drawing or with art or creation of any kind would do the same to somebody else. And
it's a lot to unpick.
It is a lot. It's a lot to
people back
unpick
into
because you've
textiles.
hung on to that for
Enjoy.
years and years.
People do.
Yeah.
And I think with the communal thing, I think that's really good, because I think you've very much it's slow stitching and mental health and well-being these days, and I think that feeds into the communal and looking out for each other.
Oh, I'm gonna say the slow stitching is one thing. I am not a slow stitcher, and I don't think. Sorry, it's not just the slow stitching.
Jedi sewing is your equivalent to
Jedi
sewing.
Jedi sewing.
I call it Jedi sewing freeform.
I love that.
So that's your equivalent to somebody else's good space to be in.
Yes. Okay.
You're fast.
That's so funny.
The act of working with textiles, whether it's
getting
Jedi or slow,
it's getting yourself into that Zen space, wherever that Zen space is, whatever you need to do to get to that meditative kind of zone and position. That is a blissful moment, and that for me, that's when things open up in this back quartile of the brain. And notice it next time you're there, you're doing something quite repetitive, and it could be cooking, peeling the spuds or something like that, and you're doing a lot of something, and your body goes into automatic pilot, and before you know it, you've worked out where something is that you've lost, or some really unfathomable thing has come to the front of your mind's eye, and it's sorted because you've lost yourself temporarily in those repetitive actions. That's fabulous for me. Absolutely fabulous. I think I would, I could, if you could bottle up how you do that.
I find that through drawing, I get that a lot. So if I've got something, say if I'm having to write a paper, or usually it's involved with writing, which doesn't come naturally to me. But if I've got something complex that I'm trying to think through, I have to actually put that all to the side, and it just sits in a drawer, and I just keep a piece of paper at the side, and I'll just be drawing away, and I'll kind of just, things come into my mind, and I'll just write things down, and I don't really think about it, but I'll just write things down, and then afterwards I'll look at my piece of paper and write, you've worked it out.
Yes.
So that thing, that's what that was all
you've
about.
Worked out that hard
but
problem.
I have to do drawing in particular, but I do find slow stitch helpful as well.
No, I just haven't met that one yet. It's obviously something different for everybody. Slow stitch thing, it's not it.
You do jewellery now.
Yes.
That's got to be slower.
Possibly, yeah. It's not frantic. It's not 1,600 stitches a minute. It is a little bit. It is a little bit slower. It is.
And you got to do little bits of preciseness.
Yeah, there
with
is
it as well.
there's precision.
I think there is some slowing down happening
maybe there
here.
is some slow. Yeah, I'm slowing down. What I'm interested in though is the way that you mentioned that you've stayed together in your group past, after COVID, past Zoom, past our Zoom world. And we talk about the way that we stayed, connected to people. And I know that my students, they keep a WhatsApp group. I had some students a couple of years ago. I saw on Instagram the other day, they were visiting one another. They've travelled different countries together and gone on other holidays with one another and things like this. And this ongoing connection with people who have been part of some togetherness, for me is lovely. It's really nice to know that there's something that goes beyond a piece of work or a piece of textiles. It continues. There isn't an end point. It's definitely open-ended. It's the start of something, not the end of something. And working communally gives that. And I know it's slightly different to your communal working, but for me, teaching, I'm working with a group. We're working together. We're getting through that week's work together, and we stay in contact, and they stay in contact without me. Sometimes they take me out of the group because they don't want to bother me, but I don't mind because it's really nice because they become my friends too, and they do more stuff together. And that's
good.
Just ace.
It's good.
It's ace to see that happen and to know that you've just set a little fire there and made more things happen. We were discussing how this then becomes synergistic. Had to get that one in today because we had to look it up just to be sure that it was right. So it becomes more than the sum of its parts. So all these lovely people come together and actually can create something much greater. So they come together, they make a quilt or a piece of textiles or a piece of artwork, but then they stay together and they carry on making something more, or they stay together and they have fabulous friendships that continue supporting one another. Indeed. And I think particularly now, after the last few years of whatever that was, we need that. We need those small connections, lots of small connections with people who give us a little bit of fire back and give us a bit of warmth and a bit of support. It doesn't need to be full support. You just need lots of little bits from lots of different types of people, and that makes you around a person. But that is not just around a person. It makes your work rounder. It makes your work more fulfilled because you've had a snippet from here, there, and everywhere, and a different point of view from a collection of people. I think that's so incredibly valuable. And you might recognise this now because you work on your own more. And I've worked on my own for forever, really. Occasionally I work in an institution at university or at a college, but actually I arrive in my studio in the morning and nobody tells me what to do or gives me an idea or says, this is how it's going to be. I have to make it all up myself and I have to inspire myself. And after years and years and years, that's quite hard. So when I get near people, my body becomes, unknowingly, it becomes a sponge. And I don't know I'm necessarily absorbing bits from people, but there will be elements of our conversation that over the coming weeks absolutely filter in some way into my work, into my thinking, into life generally. And that's great. It's really great. I need a bit of that every now and again, just for my own personal practice. I need to engage with larger groups of people. So for me, every now and again, working communally, this is the quilt in the village in Tornareccio.
I remember when that came up on, I think it was on Facebook. I just absolutely love that image. It's so cool.
The mayor introduced the quilt. It's a tiny little village and everybody's done a little bit in it. And they all dyed the fabrics and printed the fabrics and everything. And then the mayor, there was a big do and a party in the square. And we had this grand unveiling. We had dancers, we had bands, they made pasta. It was fab. I lost my other train of thought. Yes, as an individual maker, I need every now and again to do collaborative group projects and be involved with people, just so that it keeps my head in a sensible place.
Keeps you connected.
It keeps you just go into your own little wormhole. It's not healthy. So
stay grounded.
Yes, that's what it is.
Something like working with different communities, different people to kind of bring that back. Yeah.
In the way that we started off talking about it leveling everybody, it levels everybody. Yeah. The people who are supposedly leading or instigating, we're levelled as much as any participants.
I was just thinking, so within the studio, so I'm now studio based, and so I'm surrounded by other artists and makers, which is really, really wonderful. But we all have our own spaces and we have our doors closed, and then some point in the afternoon or whatever, then the doors will all open and everybody's just like popping in and having we're all pretty good, quick conversations, but it's so vital to make sure that you kind of stay tuned into what's going on in the world and don't kind of like disappear.
Some of you may know that years ago I helped set up Radiant Works. Do any of you know Radiant Works? And when Martin Smith, an automata maker, when he and I first took that space on, we weren't to have any doors. And when I decided to eventually get a space elsewhere, everybody else that had moved in put doors on their space. And I still hadn't put a door on my space. And there is a door on that space now. It was a really difficult one for me. I so wanted it to be completely open. But it's very, very difficult when people start to maybe have equipment that they need to protect or noise.
It's always a conversation, which is wonderful. But I thought I could shut the door and have a whole day, and I didn't have to speak to anybody. It was just like absolutely wonderful. But there's only so long you can do that before you start to go a bit stir crazy, and you need
people.
You need people. You need a community around you, don't you? And then getting involved in community projects. So I've just done the Growing Colour Together project, and we've run some workshops. And again, just working with communities where you haven't necessarily built up a relationship like I had with the Meltham Quilting Bee was just a whole other thing. And just the conversations that come to you are so... they seep in, don't they?
Yeah.
So you can be kind of like working away 2 weeks later on something and suddenly just remembering a little conversation that happened, and you find that kind of like getting into your work or just making you smile. Just that idea that that connection that's happened.
Yeah.
Kind of always goes beyond the intended kind of
Yes.
purpose
Yes.
of
Yeah.
the sessions.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're so right. You need it. You need it to balance you, and you need it to ground you on a regular basis. And I don't know that I could go back to working in an open plan studio now, because I've had too many years working on my own. It would be hard now. I'd give it a go. What I started to find was, though, that at that particular point, and I suppose you have different phases throughout your practice, throughout your career, and at the point where I moved away from Radiant Works, I found that people they'd come from their doored space and they'd go make a cup of coffee, and as they passed by my open plan space, they would say, "Oh, that looks nice," or they wouldn't say anything at all. And that little moment of connection or lack of connection would influence my work. They like those colours. Okay, we'll do more of that then. Or, well, they haven't said anything about that piece. Don't they like it? And my head would just make up a conversation that was or wasn't there. And that wasn't healthy either. So when I did move into a studio, we built a studio in the garden probably about 10 years ago now. And when I moved into that, I decided I wasn't letting anybody in it at all. So I went from one extreme to the other. And it was blissful, absolutely blissful. Nobody was allowed in. Kids weren't allowed in. Hubby wasn't allowed in. Nobody could make a comment on anything. So I knew that absolutely everything that came out of that space was 100% me, no external influences.
And was it better work?
Yeah, I think it was actually at the time, if I'm honest. Yeah, at the time it felt. I started drawing more. I started drawing a lot more, and because the first thing I thought was, what do I do now I've got this space all to myself? And I hadn't got lots of equipment, or I hadn't got sewing machines. Well, I must have had a sewing machine nearby somewhere, but the first thing that I did was to draw. And the way that I drew felt very different to the way that I'd drawn previously. Something just did a slight sidestep. It felt really good. And it did start me drawing a lot more. And I'm never judgmental about the outcome of the drawing. You know, it could be rubbish to other people. I'd not bothered. It made me realise that my practice was far more me. Right. Does that make sense? Yeah. And it was very, very important. But then, obviously, you do go a bit stir crazy being on your own, so you need people. Was it a small space you moved to as well? Yes, a lot smaller. Yes, yeah. A lot smaller.
Do you think that made you have to think about how you were drawing differently? Is that?
It probably, I have different phases that I go through that I'm becoming more and more aware of, where I cull equipment or cull materials or media or something like that. and I don't know, I give it away, or I sell it, or something like, yeah.
Wow. Let us know when you're doing
that.
That. Because I just kind of think, right, okay, I need to rein back to get to ground zero, and get back to basics, get back to the root starting point of. And so I had, about 15 years ago, when I left the university, I had redevelopment money from the Arts Council, and at that point, I put all of my textile stuff, I locked it underneath my print table. I literally screwed it in, I barricaded it in so I couldn't use any textiles. They were all locked away. And that forced me to use other things. It forced me to draw in a different way. And yeah, I did that. And they were locked, everything was locked away for about 6 to 9 months, I think. So I couldn't do any textiles. I quite enjoyed it.
When you got back to the textiles,
It was different. It was different. Yeah, it was different.
Reinvention queen.
I like doing that. So at the yesterday before, I found a box of coloured fabrics, and I thought, oh dear, I don't like these now. So they're going at some point. There was a big box, and I thought, I haven't looked at these for years. Yes. Could I use that space in my studio differently? Could I just have space in my studio rather than having that box of stuff? Yeah. Would space be nice? Would empty space be nice? Yes, it would. Would that give me more opportunity to think? Yes, probably would. Would that feel a lot lighter if I didn't have that? Yes, it definitely would. So things go. I actually looked at lots of my threads and thought, they're not earning their keep. I've got other threads that are more, that speak to me more. I could keep some and get rid of, I've got a lot of threads. I've got a lot.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm quite happy to let stuff go.
That's cool. I'm working on that.
I am not a hoarder. Like a lot of textilers have a massive stash. I do have a lot.
So when I was
Confessions later.
When I was doing a lot of my quilt research, one of the things that I discovered was that quilting is a hobby, and then collecting fabrics is a whole different hobby. Yes, yeah, they're actually they're two completely separate things. People
So I don't do that.
do both. I'm not a fabric hoarder. I might collect quite a lot of little beads.
There was a sign in my car that said the one who dies with the most fabric wins.
I wouldn't win that one.
I really like having that big clear out and having that fresh start. It's like a whole big breath of fresh air. Love it.
So is anybody waiting for a big breath of fresh air? Maybe it's a clear out.
I'm on a 100-item challenge.
Oh, are you?
Ah,
So by October, I have to get rid of 100 items in my flat.
100
great.
items.
Anything in your plan?
Just clutter.
Right.
Things that you just need to make a decision about to get rid of.
Yeah.
Because
So if it was
they're
like-
not adding value to your
Not adding value to your life, so the
Very
things you've got around you actually have to kind of
So
contribute.
enjoy.
Yeah, but it's that thing, isn't
So,
it? You do just pile things
I have a
up and go,
question.
"I'll put it later."
If it was 20 pencils, does that count as 20 things?
No, my friend has told me, like, you know, my big stash of cables.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, I don't know how many scarf cables one person needs.
Yeah.
But
I
that
don't
only
even know what
counts as
scarf
one.
cable does now. Doesn't do anything now. Yeah, I've got 20.
I've got a drawer full of cables.
Apparently that ball of cables is one item.
Right.
All right.
It doesn't work that way.
Making space so that you can see and feel the things that are useful to you, or the getting rid of the things that get in your way and kind of weigh your life down. God, it's so good when you get rid of them. Clothes, I do it with clothes regularly. And this, oh God, this is my confession. My name's Dionne, and I am now addicted to Vinted. Oh God, that's so good. So good.
Really?
So
For
good.
selling and buying?
I haven't sold anything yet. I really need to do that bit. But I've cleared my wardrobe out of all the things that I've got clothes that I wear. Once I find the thing that I like, I wear it till it's got holes in.
Oh, me too, yes.
But there are lots of things that I've bought along the way that haven't been that thing. So they've stayed and they've taken up space. No longer. No longer. And Vinted is replacing those things because I didn't have any clothes left.
I've done though, so I've given up on textile stuff for now. And like you, Dionne, I was like looking through fabrics going, that's not my style anymore, it's not the kind of thing that I want to be using anymore. I was like, I'm not loving this. Do you know what I mean? It's literally in a suitcase and it's got, for 2 years or more it's been in a suitcase. So I gave it all to Thread Republic. The joy that I've had having the hub here and doing workshops at the front, because everybody's gone to Thread Republic.
And got your fabric.
And they're making on the workshops with the fabrics that and it's so lovely to see
Yeah.
people finding joy in the things
Yeah.
that you've then passed on.
Yeah,
It's been hilarious,
yeah,
but it's lovely to see other people getting joy out of things that you have lost that joy in.
yeah.
I guess it's great we've got Thread Republic there.
Oh,
So that we're not wasting time.
I know.
So nice though, because I get people buying my things from me, and then I say like, "Oh, that's mine," and they say, "Oh no, I can put it back," and I'm like, "No, please use it."
Yeah,
It's been in my house
yeah.
for 10 years.
Yeah,
Please use it and love it.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired. I'm going to donate a whole load of stuff.
I think when I moved from, we moved house in lockdown, and when we moved, I had a massive bag of fabric that was, sometimes clothes, you know, they speak to you, so you kind of hang on to them because I'm going to use the fabric somewhere, and it never happens. Or I could alter that and it'll be okay when I alter it. Never happens. So all that stuff went, and Julia took that, and some stuff went elsewhere, I think. And so when I buy fabric for work, like my artwork, I know that it's going to be either cotton organdy or it's going to be heavy wool flannel, end of. Probably just heavy wool flannel. I don't need to buy anything else. Just keep it really simple. They're the things I'm using. They're my base common denominator. And then, you know, there might be a thing that creeps in around there, but leaves me lots of free thinking space for other things. It's great. Honest.
That's good. No, so the person who has
You're not
the
convinced?
No, I am completely convinced. Just need to put it into practice. But Jo Blaker, who is an artist around here, you may know her, and she's got the studio next to me, and she has nothing in the studio. Nothing in there. And I'm like, that's absolutely amazing. And she has told me that you don't want to see a house because everything's in the house. But I just think, wow, how nice must it be just to walk into an empty space and sit and think, and so
And then
just
you
say,
create
yes,
the
yeah,
things
yeah,
that go
there's-
in that
there's
space.
something
Yeah,
definitely to be said for it.
yeah. I love the idea. Well, I'm not,
Clean, but
I mean, I talk the talk. I don't completely walk the walk. I'm trying. But, you know, if you get my newsletter, look out, because sometime soon, in the next 6 months, definitely this big box of coloured stuff is going.
How do you sign up for that?
Yeah, on my website, Dionne Swift. Yeah, this box is going, and the threads. They have to go. They have to go. I like space. I like, you know, to be able to move.
You've got anybody else here who's really good with keeping clear space?
No, it doesn't really. It doesn't normally come with the whole textile territory, does it?
But it's interesting that in the sense of the thing that really surprises me with woven, and it shouldn't, because it's part of the textile community, and bringing it back to the kind of community quilt side of things, is that you can put a call out for anything to the stitch community, you know, in the sense of knitting or stitching or quilting, and you know, we've just had the Threads Republic create a new quilt for Threads of Survival. And everybody has everything that they need to make a new patch. And And the lovely thing is that people are not waiting for, but when a challenge comes up, they're running.
Yeah.
How many
And
buttons did you get? Oh my god, like tens of thousands of buttons. We've still got a load of them.
You know, it's such a generous, incredible community of talented or have a go, but you know, just that bringing together, because you've got a hoard of stuff as well. It's just so wonderful. You know, to yarn from 2 train stations. Everybody's got, you know, everything.
Everybody's got that stash, yeah.
We've got you on this, you know.
Yeah.
You've got a call out, and the community says we've got you.
Mm.
And that's a beautiful thing, and that's the thing that I love about Woven, and that's the thing I love about being in Quilted, is because it does really feel like the community's got you.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know,
It's a
it's
shame it's every 2 years.
No.
But what I've liked in our workshops is there's a friend of mine who's not a stitcher, she can sew a button on and that's about it. And she wanted to come to the workshop because she wanted to express the felling of trees that happened. And she came and she said, I just don't know, I know what I want to do but I don't know how to do it. There's the glue, there's the felt, there's a template. And you help people do what they want to do, so you find a way around it, even though I'm not that clever. I mean, when you go back to being told I was told by my stepmother I'd never amount to much, so you can't go to university. So you live with that, you won't amount to much. And it doesn't take you till you're 60 and you think, I'm going to do what I want to do. So I'm not that clever, but between us, the community, whether it's on WhatsApp and it's somebody in London or Cornwall, we find a way around it and we work together, and that's what a great thing is, and then we make something.
And I think the last couple of years, and you know, you've got to take some sort of silver lining from COVID and lockdown, and there's still
how long you've got, so do what you want to do.
Well, there is that, but the way that we all had to come together, and the way that we had to invent ways to keep our sense of community going, because we realised how much we need it. We all rallied. Everybody did.
We got a bingo machine from a working men's club and we had bonkers bingo. You also can't stand in your own house, and I had a megaphone shouting out the numbers. That's how we brought our street together.
Yeah.
And then we had another one which was bring your own pub quiz.
Yeah.
So they all just brought their own drinks to end of the drive, and then we had a pub. Because you had to, because if you hadn't have tried to keep each other
Yes.
together,
Yes.
we're falling apart.
Yeah.
Which is why I think this communal quilting thing is, because we've got to still be
Yeah.
doing something together.
Yeah, and you know, to even do such practical things as quilt making via Zoom or instructions via video. I mean, I spent definitely the first half of lockdown making videos of me sewing, and I did so partly so I didn't go mad as well. I was on. I did a live broadcast every day at 1 o'clock. From my studio, talking for 10-15 minutes about whatever came into something in my studio, until I couldn't think of anything else to say. But I started every day doing it, and then it went to once a week, and then it got less and less as lockdown eased, really, I suppose, as well. But things like Zoom and technologies helping us all to stay connected over a much larger area. That's been amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think it also, one of the things that I think is really important with textiles or with drawing or anything is for people to realise how accessible it is and how it doesn't have to be really complex. It can be super, super complex. You can do degrees in it, you can do masters in it and all of these things. But also you can just roll up or just pick up some things and just have a go, and everybody can do it. From sewing on a button or doing something super complicated. But I think that's what's one of the things that came out from COVID, was that people started to pick up things and do things again, which is really, really good, because I think people feel like it's something that they can't do.
Yes, but they can. Everybody can. Everybody can. Yeah. Nobody's
to have a bit of drive to do it, a little bit.
Yeah, just, and that could be knowing that your neighbour does it, or your friend in a WhatsApp group or your friend in a Zoom group does something similar, and you can say, oh, what do you think? Or you can say, oh, I did this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and feel proud that you've created something. But with the community work, communal work, feeling proud that you're part of a group, just part of a group is enough. So tomorrow evening, I think it's tomorrow evening, my husband is going to Soul Choir. Anybody know Soul Choir in Home Firth? Well, it's Home Firth, and they have one in Slathwaite now, and I think maybe Marsden. And he worked on his really at home, even though he was working for a company. He worked at home for years, even before COVID. And going to something like Soul Choir just means he's suddenly part of the local community and not a work-based community. And that's huge for him. And because we to and fro to Italy a lot, for us, grounding ourselves somewhere is so difficult. We're toing and froing all the time. And I can feel quite grounded quickly in Italy because I've got a lot of Italian friends in the local village and get involved in things there. And for Mark, he goes to Soul Choir to instantly get connected with people in Home Firth, in the area that we live in. It's being part of a group. Groups are actually really brilliant, even if you're not necessarily creating anything obvious. So he'll go tomorrow night and they'll practice some songs. He won't sing with them when they're performing next time because he might not be here. So it doesn't go anywhere. Just the fact that he's gone and yeah.
I was listening, this might be really good for you and I who clearly can't sing. But I was listening on the radio the other day, there was somebody who was being interviewed. Did anybody hear this? I think it was on Radio 4. There's choirs for people who can't sing.
Mm.
You heard of it? And they played a song, honestly.
Does it sound awful?
I nearly wet myself. It was so funny. It was absolutely dreadful. But I was like,
that's ideal.
Maybe we
that's ideal.
Voiceless choir or just tuneless choirs or something. It was amazing. But just that, again, it's not really, just like with the making quilts or with all of these things.
Yeah, it's not really about the thing. It's the fact it's the people you're doing it with and the fact that you might then recognise them next time you're at something and you've got someone to talk to because you've got one small common element between you.
Yeah.
Mm.
If you want to laugh, check out these bad choirs. It was absolutely hilarious. I was like,
that's ideal. That's ideal.
And then the DJ came on afterwards and did say, if there is anybody who is managing to not laugh, having heard that. So I was just thinking, as I was laughing, I was like, oh my God, I haven't laughed so much in a long time. It was really funny. But yeah, no, that point about coming together is what's the crucial thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And I suppose it's the same with us. Every now and again, we probably see one another, quite rarely, but when we do, there's connections, and it's that's what you need.
I think you've just got to end on the word of the day, haven't you? Googled word of the day. What is it?
Synergy. Synergistic. Synergistic.
Synergistic, absolutely.
We are bigger than the sum of our parts. Yes.
Absolutely.
That's what community work does.
Thank you guys. I know you guys won't fill 2 hours, won't fill an hour and a half. You definitely do fill 2 hours or an hour and a half with brilliant conversations. Thank you so much.
There you go.